Okay, I think we have everyone joining us now, so we're going to get started. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Colleen McIntyre. I'm the Managing Director for Central Texas at Genesis10, and I'm the moderator of our panel discussion today, Navigating Tech Talent, Hiring Challenges, Reskilling and Upskilling. Genesis10 is presenting this event in partnership with SIM Austin. SIM Austin is the local chapter of the Society for Information Management, and they provide a unique opportunity to interact with thought leaders throughout the technology and business fields. The local chapter of Austin has programs the second Tuesday of every month, and those can be found on the SIM Austin website, so please check that out and join us. Genesis10 is proud to be a platinum sponsor of SIM. And for those of you who do not know us, Genesis10 is a talent, workforce solutions, and technology consulting firm. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to have with us our panelists, Tracy Haber, who is Technology Leadership Development Program Lead at AT&T, Chris Hightower, Senior Manager at Southwest Airlines, and Tara Wyburn, Director of Emerging Talent Programs at Genesis10. So welcome, Tracy, Chris, and Tara. Thank you. What I'd like to do now is just invite each panelist to introduce themselves briefly and describe your role that you play in your company's hiring of technical talent. So Tracy, do you want to start?
Hi, so I'm Tracy Haber with AT&T. I work in the Technology Development Program, which is our college hiring and internship program. And that program has been in place within AT&T for 20 years. For the past 8 years, I've been in the role of operations and strategy for the program. We are hiring technology candidates for all technology roles in AT&T, usually junior data scientists, software engineers, network engineers, and some business analyst types that work within the technology space in the company.
Okay. And Chris, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Hightower, and I'm a senior manager in the technology department at Southwest Airlines. Been at Southwest for about 20 years now, and been in the people leadership for almost 10 years. And so I frequently am staffing positions. My team is a development team, so we're specifically hiring lots of developers, but also analysts, product owners, scrum masters, project managers. So often have needs for interfacing with professional services vendors, and also our own employees that we're working on. How do we retain them? How do we improve? Work on continuous improvement of our employees and professional services.
Okay, great. And Tara.
Hi, I'm Tara Wyburn. I'm the Director of Emerging Talent Programs here at Genesis10. I've been here closing in on, I guess, 11 and a half years. I oversee our both traditional college hire program called our G10 Associates program, as well as over the last 3 years, I've had the opportunity to lead the operations and development of our Dev10 program, which is a program focused on creating new technical talent. So my team is responsible for the recruitment and placement of talent across the technology spectrum. So data engineers, data scientists, software engineers, software developers, as well as the more functional side. So project managers, business analysts, et cetera. And over the last 3-4 years, my role really has evolved to how we not only create and develop talent that is more work ready than the traditional college hire, but also in how we improve and continually drive the development of talent once they are actually engaged and employed here at Genesis10.
Okay, great. Thank you all. So we want today's event to be interactive, and we encourage you to join our discussion by submitting your questions in the chat box. So with that, we'll get started. A recent article in the Harvard Business Review finds that coming out of the pandemic, organizations will need to prioritize reskilling and upskilling to attract and retain the talent they need to make their businesses grow. Those that do will boost the motivation of their existing workers and gain the attention of the brightest new recruits, positioning themselves to emerge from the pandemic, not just where they were, but stronger and in a better position to move forward. I think that we can all agree that reskilling and upskilling can only help navigate our challenges with hiring tech talent. So I'm going to start off with a question for each of the panelists, the same question I'm going to ask them each to answer briefly. And that question is, what unique programs or solutions have you used or created to address the challenges you've had in hiring and retaining tech talent and building alternative talent pools? So Tracy, I'm going to start with you.
All right. So I think this may be a common theme on the panel, but probably 7 or 8 years ago, we began leveraging our college hire program as a means and a start to bringing in people who were upskilling. We also, around the same time, began upskilling our existing workforce. With the pace of technology changing as rapidly as it does, you have to do both, in my opinion, if you're keeping a group of any size. So about 7 years ago, we first started reskilling existing employees, and the efforts were very successful. So we began leveraging some of those same partners to fulfill our growing tech talent need. In several cases, our philanthropic arm, the AT&T Foundation, was a great source of help. They identified a lot of worthy partners that we were funding anyway, and we were able to connect the student beneficiaries of those scholarships and funds to meaningful careers at AT&T.
Okay, great. And Chris, I'm going to ask you that same question in terms of the unique programs or solutions you've used to create and address challenges in hiring tech talent and building alternative talent pools.
Yeah, and similar to Tracy, we do have college hire programs. We also have what we call a warrior hire program, which is we hire people who are coming out of the military and who are looking for professional careers. So we focus on that. Then we also work with a lot of our professional services vendors to bring in talent. One of the unique programs that we've found is with Genesis10, actually, the Dev 10 program that they have there, bringing in young or inexperienced technical talent who've gone through a boot camp, but can come in and start producing quickly, but at a low cost. So in addition to those things, personally, what I mainly focus on is ensuring that the people that I'm working with who are recruiting for us, they have a really good understanding of our corporate values and how my team in particular functions. So that way, when they are bringing in people that we find very good fits for our team, and I also ensure that people on my team who are going to be working with those resources are doing are part of the hiring process. They're interviewing as well, because they will know best what's going to be a good fit for our team. So those are some of the specific things that we do.
Okay. And Tara, I'll switch it up so you're not last all the time.
Okay. So in my role, I have for the last 11 years, similar to Tracy, focused on a college pipeline of talent to be part of our solution of bringing in that next generation of talent. And then within our G10 Associates program, back when we started in 2008, we immediately had a training component associated to really fill those gaps between the college degree programs and really the skills that we needed to be able to deploy them into our client sites. And during that experience, we really started to see the dynamic shift within the software development space as companies started to look for talent that was more than just able to write code, but were able to engage with the business. We're expected to move into these more agile pods. That's when we really started looking at not only is the talent pipeline tight in the technical space, but it's not necessarily creating the volume or the type of talent that we're needing these days to stay competitive in the market. So Dev 10, as Chris referenced, he does have a few of our team members on his team, was our solution to that. So within Dev 10, we create new talent through going out and looking for people that are new college graduates that maybe they found software development junior or senior year and it was just too late to make that switch, or they're professionals that are, anywhere from 3 to 10 years out of school, and they've become exposed to technology through the role. I think all of us now are so much more engaged with technology than we ever were a decade ago, that we're finding a large pipeline of talent that really just wants to get their foot in the door there. And so we created a boot camp model where we actually go out, we recruit those high aptitude, passionate, dedicated individuals, and we give them the skills they need to be successful. So as a business, that helps Genesis10 and helps our client partners in turn to have access to a more predictable, more scalable pipeline of talent that's going to have not only those vetted technical skills that we need as a consulting firm, but also those soft skills that have really been a challenge, I think, in the technical space to develop, especially those coming straight out of college. So it's been a fun adventure as we've kind of molded what we learned since 2008 in a traditional college hire model, and now we get to apply it in a slightly different model where we're truly focused on upskilling and talent creation.
Great, thank you all for answering that question. And then to build on that, Tracy, I'm going to ask, what have been some of the keys to success with regards to onboarding, kind of the unique or newly created talent?
Mm-hmm. So onboarding is something that we take very, very seriously. I think there's a whole lot of research and information out there about how the better you do onboarding, the stickier the employee is long term. So it's something that we've focused very heavily on. I think probably the greatest indicator of that was we moved from a model last year by force where we were onboarding everybody in the office prior to March, and then suddenly we needed to onboard everyone virtually. So we had to react to that very, very quickly. Couple that with the fact that there were shortages of equipment, and those are things that software engineers you can't software engineer without a laptop. So we had to figure out all the logistics. So that, was a challenge that we tackled. But I think one of the things that we do just generally is that regardless of whether you're reskill, upskill, or a traditional college hire, we treat all new and career hires very similarly. We bring them all in via the TDP program, which is a 2-year program at AT&T. Okay. And we are set up with centralized leadership. So I jokingly refer to them as the kindergarten teachers of the corporate world, but they probably don't like that very much, but they're adept. The reason why I do that is, teaching is a noble profession. It doesn't matter if you teach kindergarten or college, you still have a noble profession. And there's a unique way that you address someone who's new in career versus someone who has been around the block for 20 years. So by having that centralized leadership, these people are absolutely laser focused. We have 19 people leaders around the country who bring in TDPs. They're laser focused on getting them acclimated and then helping them excel in their new role. And because they do this over and over again, it's very, it's old hat. There's usually not a challenge they haven't already tackled at least once before. And they are able to bring folks in, get them acclimated, get them excelling in their role. And then I think the one thing that I would be remiss to fail to mention is that we need to provide them with a safe environment in which to try and fail. They're new in their job. I think probably everyone on this call heard about HBO Max and integration test email number 1. HBO Max is an AT&T Warner Media company. So all of that, we have to provide them with a safe place to try and fail and support them in learning from a failure when they have those. So I think that's kind of a key to how we do that. We also provide specialty communities. So if your role is a software engineer or a data analyst, you have specialty communities for your role to help you. And then we also have an internal version of Stack Overflow. So if you have a question that nobody in your specialty community can help you with, then you have a reference to go out there and call in the big guns.
Okay, that's great. So a lot of initiatives to support and like you said, really make them safe to know that they can make a mistake and learn from that. Chris, I'm going to ask you, during your journey, what have been some of the surprises and what advice would you give an organization that wants to embark on an endeavor to create a program or utilize a program to reskill and upskill? Sure.
And actually, to kind of build off of Tracy's answer on how important onboarding is, one of the things that as a hiring manager, I learned the hard way several times is how important it is to wait for the right person. When we have an open position to fill, it's so tempting to just grab the first person that comes along that seems like they might be good.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to wait for the right fit, and like Tracy said, make sure that you do a really good job of getting that person well prepared. For those who have been in hiring manager positions, if you make the wrong choice there, you're not just setting yourself back a month or so to find a new person. You're setting yourself back like 6 months to a year, because it takes time to find out that person's really not the right person, and then you have to go through the entire process of making the decision and making a change. So yeah, totally agree with you, Tracy. That's so important. So some of the other surprises that we've had, and of course the pandemic has been a surprise for everyone, and Tracy touched on adjusting to onboarding during a pandemic. One of the things that we've had to address during that time of everyone shifting from being in the office to working from home is how out of touch people can start to feel. People who have strong, like if you've got a strong family environment, that doesn't affect them as much, but we have found that a lot of our professionals who maybe single, at home alone, they would go for months without seeing a person, and starting to feel really out of touch. And we had some people who were starting to develop some real mental health issues because of this. So one of the things that we developed on our team was just being intentional about making sure everyone on the team had one-on-one connections with someone else. So I have my leads, making sure that they're having connections with their leads, and their leads are having connections with the individual developers, to make sure that everybody's getting not just a professional connection, but also a personal connection. I encourage them to, you're not trying to delve into somebody's personal life, but just check up on them. How are you doing? How is your family? How, if they don't have family, how are your pets, or whatever their condition is? Make sure that they know that somebody cares about them. And I've heard back from my leads that has made a huge difference on our teams, for those people to just know that somebody cares about them. And in terms of retaining our talent, we found that that's been a big factor as well. Just creating that environment of trust, and creating an environment where people, that your team cares about you. You're much more likely to stay on that team than to go look for a position somewhere else. So that's been a huge factor there. Do I have a little bit more time?
Yeah.
So one of the other surprises, as your question was about surprises there, one of the surprises that we found is that while training is good, it really doesn't prepare somebody for the role. The best training is experience, right? So we have stopped focusing so much on getting people the right training as we have just throwing them in on the deep end and hoping that they swim, but helping them along the way. Obviously,
Sure.
we focus on pair programming and mentoring to make sure that they have what that they need, but get them into the actual work, and that is the best kind of training is that experience that they get. So
I have a question about, you mentioned hiring right the first time. So, what processes have you put in place to ensure that you're hiring right the first time?
right. Well, I touched on this in the answer to the first question, but a lot of it has to do with knowing your corporate values. And I'm sure everyone on this in this panel, everyone who's listening, your company has listed values, right? Those may or may not be your actual values. It may just be what your marketing people came up with, or someone came up with 20 years ago that's not really your values. And your personal team values may be slightly different. So we have found it very useful to take a look at those and make sure that you know what your real values are, and make sure everyone in your team knows those values as well. So that way, when you're looking for new talent, you're really comparing those people that you're interviewing with those values. So if you're familiar with Patrick Lencioni, he wrote a very good book about this. It's called The Ideal Team Player. Highly recommend you read that. And there's some example values in there that a lot of companies have adopted. And it may or may not apply to your company, but the advice is to really look at your corporate values, your team's values, so that when you're hiring people, you're hiring the right kind of person. It's really tempting to go hire somebody with the right number of years experience in a certain we have found that's useful to have that experience, but not nearly as useful as hiring the right kind of person.
Okay.
I'm just going to piggyback off of that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
We went through a very similar exercise a little over a year ago, where we went through on every job and we determined what are the cultural things that you want to interview for, matches, and also then we forced everyone to define what are the exact competencies that are required to be successful in job day one. And you'd be surprised how much you can really winnow down to what's needed in a job. And then we purpose built from scratch the entire interview process, only to get to what are the things does this candidate possess, the skills and competencies that are required to do the job day one. And so we built tests and interview questions around each of those. We have HR research within AT&T has PhD psychologists that help us develop questions that get to that. And then we created all of our interview guides to match. So when we are hiring someone, we are going through very purpose-built, do they possess and can they demonstrate the possession of the skills that are required to be successful in the job. It was very, very critical, Chris. I can't agree more.
So and I actually wanted to jump in on something that Chris brought up as well, which is, and Tracy, I mean, frankly, it's interesting having gone to this remote world. Had you called me in February of 2019, 2020, whatever, and said, hey, we're going to start onboarding all these people remotely, I would have said, forget that. We're never doing that, especially with new talent or talent that needs to be changed. And then on March 12th, I changed my mind because we didn't have a choice, right? I think we've learned a lot about that onboarding. And Chris, you were talking about, the loneliness factor. I don't know a better way of putting it, but that I also saw coupled with when we were bringing in new talent, no matter their level of years of experience, frankly, there was also this much more intentional way that we have to interact now remotely. And so we looked at, when we were bringing people into training, how do we create more of those intentional connections? So we actually started for our internal team doing what we call donut calls, right? That's purely a social interaction. You're scheduling intentional time just to get to know your teammates. It's not to talk about dev work. It's not to talk about anything other than your family, your hobbies, who likes to cook, who hates to run, whatever. The other piece was, okay, once you're in training or you're tackling your job, we needed to make sure we had a lot of different types of channels available to our staff to ask questions, because not everyone was comfortable in the, hey, I'm going to drop in and send a IM to my colleague, or I'm not totally comfortable going to my lead yet, or I don't want to schedule a 30-minute meeting. I don't know the culture here yet in those first few weeks. So we were really intentional about creating, almost like what Tracy was saying, the wiki type pages that they could be resourceful, the group channels that they could go to we use Microsoft Teams, that they could go to and kind of crowdsource answers, as well as having our leadership then reach out and start those one-on-one conversations through chat. Because it's funny how that little psychology of, I'm going to be the first one to initiate, we saw was actually creating some pause, if you will, and some of our people going to ask the question. So, really focusing on how do we just engage more intentionally and let them know that we want them to engage, right? There's no bad question. When we were in the office, it was, you're right there. It's much more casual. So breaking down that, and similar to like what Tracy and Chris have said, that hiring the right way. I will say I've also had to change how our recruiting team looks and interviews and interacts virtually as well, right? So how do we make sure that when we're interacting with talent virtually, that we're getting the right types of answers and interactions and creating more of that group dynamic so we can see how people interact in team settings, et cetera. So it's been a really interesting transition, picking up these small lessons and being able to be really agile with how we interact and onboard with our new staff to make sure that until we're back in person again, that they're getting that same level of engagement that they had when we were all in the same room together.
And I know this isn't something we talked about, but obviously we're talking about retention. And so all of these strategies, I'm assuming, have increased your company's retention rates. I don't know if anyone can speak to numbers. I didn't ask you to prepare for this, so I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Go ahead, Craig. So I would say, retention, comparing annualized attrition figures now compared to pre-pandemic is sort of like apples and oranges. But clearly retention is something we're always after, especially with this particular group of skills. It's so hard to replace them in the market that you really always have to be considerate of that. But yes, our attrition improved over the course of the last year, but I'm hesitant to say it's anything I did. I think it could have just been people were not ready to move. And I think we're all sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. We all know, I was reading this morning something like 43 or 53% of the US workforce is saying, I hate my job, I want a new one. And many of them are looking for completely different changes, like changes to the field in which they're working. So yes, it got better, but I'm not sure it was me.
And Chris, you were going to comment as well.
Sure. So one of the other questions that I think is coming up in the list here was talking about retention. And as I thought about how to answer that question, I really started to think about, well, what are the reasons why people leave? If we're talking about how do we retain them, we need to know why they leave. And in my experience, I kind of identified 3 reasons why people leave a team. You do have people who are just career motivated and they have goals that they want to fulfill that they just can't do on your team for some reason. If you're on a team of developers and somebody wants to be an architect and you don't have that position on your team, they might leave. Because they're offered a new position. And there's really not a lot that you can do about that. It's one of those things where you can't control. So focusing on the things that you can control, the two other reasons I've seen people leave, if you have a what I would call a toxic team environment, where people don't feel safe on the team, or for some reason they don't feel that they can function within the team. You know, there's a lot of great resources out there for how to create a good team environment. So that would be something to focus on. You know, ask yourself, you know, what does my team environment look like if you're having a hard time retaining people? And then one of the most important reasons, one of the biggest reasons I've seen people leave teams, and I've talked about this a little bit already, is that if people don't feel appreciated on the team, if they don't feel valued, right? It's that innate human desire to know that my work, the things that I do, mean something. There's a great story about, obviously it's a not a real story, but about two men who are building a wall, right? And somebody comes up to one man and says, you know, well, why are you building this wall? And he's like, well, you know, because I've been told, you know, put this brick on top of that brick, and you know, my life is really meaningless. And then the guy goes to the next person and says, well, why are you building this wall? And the man replies, because I'm building a cathedral, right? And they're doing the exact same thing, but it's totally different perspective of the two men. And I think our role as leaders is to help our teams have that perspective of that what you're doing is important. It's making a difference. You're helping our company save money. You're helping our customers have a better experience. You're, you know, whatever the case is for the work that they're doing, really help them to see that value. So that way they really understand how they fit into the bigger picture. And that's made a huge difference on my team, just having the people have that perspective. So.
Okay, great, thank you. And we may have touched on this a little bit, but you know, as you develop these programs, brought in, you know, new programs or trying new things, what are some of the lessons learned? What did you wish you knew then that you know now? And I'll start with Tracy.
Okay, yeah. So I would say that my biggest lesson learned, and this is probably so obvious to everyone else, but it was an epiphany for me, is it's not always easy for non-traditional hires to acclimate with the college interns and fresh college grads. So we always do a lot of surveys and pulse checks and focus groups to make sure we're listening to our employees. But through these, we heard that non-traditional hires have additional struggles with imposter syndrome. You know, if they didn't grow up in a CS major, then they tend to question themselves. And so they may not also want the same things from an office space, or they have different personal needs. So we built out a list of additional resources, and those things, you know, provide help for articles about overcoming imposter syndrome. And we make sure that we tell them in our one-on-ones that it's okay to be the only person in the room that has to get up at a random time of the day and care for childcare pickup or an elderly parent, or you don't have to feel weird if you're the only person who doesn't want to play in the incredibly competitive office ping pong tournament. All of those things are very attractive to our new in-career traditional college grads, and maybe not so much so for people who have upskilled or reskilled, and we make sure that we meet them where they are as well.
Okay, great. Anyone else want to comment on that? No.
I can't echo that more. I mean, I will say that I should have been more prepared for that, because just look at my own life and compare it to a college student and see the obvious, you know, differences there. But it is true, and making them confident in that difference, and that we're here, we get it, we know where you're at, we totally respect that, and we know where the people, like in my group, there's lots of people that like playing PC games and stuff like that, and then we've got parents that are like, yeah, no, I've got kids, I've got stuff to do. And so, yeah, I agree, Tracy. That was a big, like, how did I miss that? But we're there now, and it's great because now we've got they've got each other too as resources, like you're saying, being able to connect them and have them find that community of people that are going through a similar life stage than, you know, more traditional new hires.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to skip one question and come back to it and go to, in addition to these new programs, the talent creation programs, what is your company doing to upskill current employees, retrain them and increase retention? We talked about a little bit about the retention piece before, Chris, but in terms of reskilling and upskilling.
Yeah, so kind of alluding back to one of my previous answers, mainly trying to get them that experience. We do have official training programs and things like that, and those are useful. You certainly need a base level of understanding before you can even start the work. But for the most part, we found that just getting them the experience, day one, assign them to a user story and get them coding on it. We focus on the pair programming, so that way the people can learn from each other. Mentoring programs where our tech leads and our development leads have assigned people that they're mentoring to make sure that those people are getting the right kind of experiences. One of the struggles that we've had with kind of upskilling is people get comfortable in the role that they're in. And we may want them to move to a new role, or we may want them to, we're like, hey, you're not growing.
Sorry.
So we've had to be intentional about that, where one developer was a primary on a certain topic or a certain application, and we've had to just say, okay, you're not that anymore. Now you're going to go over here. We're going to put somebody else's primary on that application to force that knowledge transition to happen. And that's been very useful to make sure that upskilling is happening as well.
Okay. One of the, important focuses of these programs might be around how it impacts diversity, equity, and inclusion hiring. And so, Tara, if you could speak to that in terms of your programs.
Yeah, so certainly college hire in general has always been something that I've encouraged people to consider in terms of creating a more diverse talent pipeline, because the newer generation is more diverse and also more technically engaged than previous generations, right? They grew up with the internet and with tablets in their hands, right? So we've got a new, fresh group of more diverse people coming into the pipeline, which is a great way to create that diversity. But one of the things that we accidentally did within Dev10, and now we're focusing on, is that when we took away the degree requirement for computer science to enter Dev10, when we said, hey, we're going to go out to all of the degree programs and look for bright people that want to do this job, we inadvertently created a significantly more diverse talent pipeline for ourselves. So we saw a tremendous number of women applying to our program. We saw a tremendous number of people of color applying to our program that we wouldn't have had access to had we limited our degree program, focused on people with even STEM degrees initially. And as we've expanded out, that's really been able to help us drive some pretty impressive numbers. Around 53-54% of the people that we bring into Dev10 now are either women or BIPOC. And that's something that has been really fantastic to see. Just not only the diversity of people, but also the diversity of thought that comes with bringing in these different backgrounds. And also, I don't have the numbers to prove it yet because we're only 3 years into this, but I think seeing that representation across Dev10 is also improving that retention within tech, right? So as we're able to drive more diverse talent into tech, they see themselves represented more frequently in teams, which is going to help them feel more comfortable, confident, and hopefully, 5-7 years down the road, we can look at this and say, okay, how many of those people stayed in tech? And see if that really did drive the outcomes we're hoping for. So, now we're really looking at Dev10 as a way to engage much more outwardly in the community to drive more people into tech and really, continue to double down that accidental benefit that we reaped when we started to evolve that program.
Okay, great. And Tracy, I think
I have a similar experience. I think a lot of companies view their diversity hiring through the lens of benchmarks. Are you hiring new technologies at a pace that equals graduation rates? And that's a start. But when you look at the incredibly low graduation rates from CS programs for women and Black people and brown people, it becomes really apparent that you've got to find some other funnels. So I think, despite years of work to improve it, CS female graduation rate is stagnant and has been for the last decade at 18%. So if you want a greater than 18% share of software engineers, you have to look elsewhere. And so that was also what led us to embrace the skills over schools mindset. And, we didn't begin our non-traditional journey for this reason, but we've certainly been pleased by the outcome. I think it's very similar to what you experienced as well, Tara.
Okay, and I'm just we've got some questions. I don't know if I think I'll wait towards the end unless you see something that you would like to respond to here. I guess the one question that just came up and maybe would have advice is, what about individuals who are working on job pivoting, who are graduates of an IT boot camp, but they don't have a degree? Is there any advice to those individuals?
So I would say that, so AT&T does not hire from all boot camps. We have been very purposeful in who we hire from. We know the curriculum and we know the quality of candidate that's produced by those funnels. So I would say if you're looking to go to a boot camp or you've completed a boot camp, that my best advice would be to go to that boot camp and talk to them about who's hiring from them. And then go after those companies.
That as well. If you did already attend a boot camp, reach out to their career services individuals. They should have the relationships with the companies that are looking to hire. I do think that companies, my experience being in a consulting organization is that I get a chance to talk to HR leaders and technology leaders across different clients and different companies and industries. And we're making a slow shift. And it's a shift that I really, really am behind around starting to remove that degree requirement. But you got to look for those companies that have removed that. So right, wrong, or indifferent, companies are in different spaces as it relates to that requirement, and just go and look for them. There's plenty of resources out there that can point you to companies that have taken that out of their requirement to hire.
Great, thank you both. In terms of, this kind of leads into that, when you were working with your teams, how did you get your teams on board with your program to hire candidates from the non-traditional backgrounds? So when you came to them with the idea of hiring non-CS degree individuals, or how did you get them on board with this, Tracy?
Yep. So I mentioned earlier that the graduates of these programs are coming into the technology development program, and talked about the care with which we are selecting the candidates. Beyond that, we're not making a big to-do about how they got those skills. You just know if you come to TDP, you're getting the person with those skills. And so the receiving organization, from their perspective, they just see they're getting a TDP hire. They're less concerned about where the skills were learned and more concerned about the person's ability to do the job. So through our curriculum within the TDP program, we ensure that they're all ready. They're ready to be incredibly productive in their next job. We're thorough with that hiring process. We leverage tests and assignments, and then we spend a couple of years teaching them the rest. So I think the only other thing that's critical to that is that we look for candidates with a continuous learning mindset. And Chris, that kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier. Maybe that's your value, but it's not necessarily a company value. We understood early on that in tech, you know, shelf life, if you do have a CS degree, is like 3 to 5 years. So if you don't have a continuous learning mindset, you're never going to be able to keep up with the pace of change in technology. So we're looking for people who have that. And then we're making sure that on the end, you know, the recipient of that talent, it's seamless for them. They know they're getting somebody from TDP that has the skills.
Okay. Chris, did you have a comment on?
Yeah. So I was thinking back to when I first introduced my team to this Dev 10 concept that Genesis 10 has, and bringing in these young, inexperienced professionals. There was concern on my team. My tech leads were like, well, you know, what am I going to do with this guy? And so I approached it from, hey, let's try this as an experiment and see how it goes. And that's really how we approached it. It was, we don't know if this is going to work or not, but let's give it a try. If it works, this is a great way for us to bring in some young talent who we can then teach and groom the way that we want them to grow, and really invest in them and build up somebody over time who's going to be a potentially a great employee for their company long term. So that's kind of how we approach that. And and it's been a very successful experiment for us. So that's kind of how I would approach it. And I also tied it into our Southwest values. You know, we're the low cost airline, and so cost is always something that we're very focused on. So I approached it from that perspective as well. You know, explaining, you know, this is a way for us to potentially bring in really good talent at a lower cost, and so that really resonated with the people on my team. So.
Okay, great. Okay. So there was another question about upskilling. If someone wants to take this, you know, with regards to upskilling, how do you deal with those that don't want to give up primary roles to make a change? What would you say to encourage them?
Some people are just not going to want to change. You know, people are always different on the change curve, right? Some people are get used to change very quickly and they won't have a problem with it. Some are very resistant. You got to spend a little more time with them, and there comes a time where you're just going to have to tell them, this is the way we've got to do it. I have to have more than one person who knows this system. So it can always be you. You'll never be able to take a vacation. If you, for some reason, left the company, we'd be in a very bad state. So that at least helps them understand the why. You know, I'm not trying to necessarily replace you. It's not that you're not doing a good job. I need to have more than one person who knows this. And then you just kind of have to force it. You make the org change if necessary to get that person out of that role and a new person in that role. And you want to do that before you have to make the change, so that when somebody decides to leave or just moves to a different team in your company, you're not suddenly in a lurch with no one to know that system.
That's good advice.
I would also add to that, you know, I think it's good for you to find out why they're not wanting to give up their primary role. Is it resistance to change, or is it maybe not having the time to do it? If it's time to do it, it's probably cheaper to reskill them than to find somebody else. So can you carve out dedicated time to them that they can leverage to make that shift? And barring all other reasons, I think we would probably all agree that money is important. And so one of the things that we think a lot about at AT&T is compensation transparency. And so every title is published. So if you go look at we call them target salary ranges. If you go look at the target salary ranges based on where you are physically located, because costs are different in different geo zones. If you look at your title or a title that you might want to get into, those are differentiated, and you can go see, gee, if I want to get a little bit more money, I probably should think about doing an upskill or doing a reskill so that I can continue to have salary growth. And so I hope that helps.
Thank you both. So I think last question, because we're getting near the hour, is what do you see as the buy versus build pros and cons of bringing this talent into your organizations? And I'll start with Tara on this one.
I actually think that there are pros and cons to both. So from my perspective, just to define what I consider build versus buy. So buy is, going to the market and finding the person that perfectly fits that job that you're looking to fill. I think for many of us that have been in hiring for a long time, people tend to see someone leave their team and they're like, okay, I would like the exact replica of that human. And then they go to their HR team and they're like, here's this crazy laundry list of technical skills and experiences. And you sit there and you go, okay, so on the buy side, if I try to go buy that, does that human exist? Maybe. What are the chances I get it? What is the market rate? And you start to see the cons of that generally pretty quickly, right? But there certainly are situations where that might be, based on team dynamics, based on, the tenure of your team, et cetera, that is the solution that needs to be considered in certain situations. So the pros of that are obviously that you bring someone in that has theoretically a lot lower ramp time, and they're able to contribute. And certainly if they're in a leadership or a tech lead role, they bring a lot of those skills that we need to help facilitate that team. The build pros, though, are a lot of the things that Chris said, and it's a lot of what I see in my program too, is that we get to dictate the skills that we need. We get to build the skills that we need and in the way that we want our people to build their skills. They come oftentimes, even if they're career changers, into tech without a lot of the bad habits that can be taught at other organizations, right? So it's whether they're, a new college grad or someone that's just making their first pivot into engineering. For me, I see that they're like a clean slate, and we're able to really help them build and adjust and define their skill set as it best suits us. So from my perspective, there's a lot of pros to building your talent base versus trying to consistently go out to market and try to find these needles in a haystack. The other, pro of the build, in my perspective, is that you can often get someone doing work faster. And will it be the same level of work as you might have gotten from getting that, 5, 7, 10, 14-year person? No, but you might spend 6, 8, 10 months looking for that one person. And if you could have just brought in that new fresh face that was excited to learn, had that continuous learning mindset, was ready to just grab onto what you've got, they could make some pretty shocking and significant value adds during that time, right? So granted, I'm biased because I've worked in the university recruiting and what I'll call the build space for a long time. I just think there's certainly situations where you need that experience, but there's a lot of really amazing benefits that come with being open to new talent and being willing to invest in them, because you can really reap returns on that investment.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment on?
Sure, I can add.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree with Tara. I mean, obviously there are lots of times where you just have to get that experienced person in the door because that's what you need on your team. But the huge benefit that I've seen to building up new talent from within, you get movement on your team, you get some upward momentum on your team. I like to use an analogy of a pond versus a lake. If your team is like a pond, it's kind of stagnant, right? You got no movement in, no movement out. Even if you're replacing one person with a new person, they're the exact same kind of person, right? And so your team kind of stagnates. There's not a lot of growth. So what I'd like to do on my teams is to make sure that we've always got some movement going on. We've got some young people who are growing up, and those older, more experienced tech leads, they're focused on building up those people so that they can move on to something bigger and better in their career. So you want that movement, like in a lake where you got a river flowing in and a river flowing out. So that's a huge benefit to everyone on the team. Your young people are getting that experience. Your older people are mentoring. They're showing that they know how to build people, which is obviously a skill that they need to have when they move up to the next level. So yeah, I definitely agree with Tara. The building is hugely important for your team.
Okay. Great. Well, we are nearly at the hour, and so I think we need to start wrapping up. I don't know if there was any last minute 30-second comment anybody wanted to make, or if there was any question that would be helpful for us. We'll make sure that we answer questions. This event is being recorded, and that will be sent out. And certainly you can contact myself too if you need a copy of the recording. But that's really all the time we have for today. And I want to thank again Tracy Haber and Chris Hightower and Tara Wyburn for joining us and giving us their time today. And I hope that you all enjoyed it. And we look forward to getting together again for another interesting panel discussion. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.